Destiny Alvarado, this is for you. Thank you for requesting it. I'd love to tell the history of my family, what I know. My great-grandparents came from Fort Worth down to where is now Post, Texas, in a covered wagon with their children and settled in that area near Post. My great-grandfather's first job in the area was being a ranch hand on the Slaughter Ranch, I believe. And I believe that is where he and his wife and children lived in a dugout, which is very small, maybe the size of your bathroom times 1.5, maybe. And there was one bed. But the school teacher had to take turns boarding with different families in the area. So when the school teacher was boarding with them, Grandfather McMahon would go outside and let the school teacher come in and get ready and go to bed first. Then all the children, then Mrs. McMahon, Grandmama Ola, and then Grandfather Joseph would come in and go to bed finally. And that's how they boarded the school teacher. That was probably a good thing on cold nights to have all those warm bodies in a bed. Boy, I tell you what, it doesn't sound very comfortable to us, especially now. We've got so many things, and our homes are so much bigger and brighter, and we can't even imagine living in a dugout. My grandfather eventually got a job as postmaster at Litwalton, Texas. And I guess that's in the area near Post. I don't really have any idea. I don't think there's even a town there anymore. But he got the job as postmaster. And before he was postmaster, he delivered mail. And he delivered mail in a buggy because that was all the car they had. And then he became postmaster. And unfortunately, my great-grandfather died while my grandfather was young. My grandfather was 11 years old, and he became the man of the family. And they struggled. They had some hard times. They had a farm that they had gotten, that they had homesteaded, and they worked and raised cotton. And that farm was in the family until my grandfather died, and his heir, his only grandson, decided he didn't have time to deal with it, and he sold it, and that was fine. But it was a precious memory to have, to go out and visit that farm and jump over the cotton rows. But my papa also delivered mail. He started out in a covered wagon, or not a covered wagon, but a buggy with horses. In fact, my grandparents were married in a buggy. They had their best Sunday clothes on and in the buggy, and they went to meet the circuit riding preacher who only came by maybe once a month. And he married them sitting there in the buggy. We have a picture of it. It's so precious. And then my grandfather delivered in the buggy with the horses. And of course that took a lot of time to get anywhere to deliver mail. And in Post, Texas, it's part of what they call the Llano Estacado, which means staked plains. It's down below what we call a caprock. It's in a canyon. And to deliver mail to the outlying areas, you usually had to go back up a canyon. And the steepest caprock in the area is the one we call the Fluvanna caprock. And that is just, it's still really steep. It was kind of scary going up the highway on that as a child, much less going up on a dirt road with a horse and buggy. But turns out my grandfather also delivered in a Model T, and for the Caprocks, he liked the horse and buggy better because the Model T couldn't get all the way up the Caprock. So that's just a fun story for when he would deliver mail in Post, Texas. And he became the assistant postmaster in Post, Texas, and he knew everybody in town. Everybody called him Mr. Mac. They didn't say Mr. McMahon, they said Mr. Mac, and he was one of the most precious people you'd ever meet. He loved the Lord Jesus with all of his heart. He didn't know a stranger, and he was always willing to help somebody in trouble. Some of my sweetest memories, though, are so simple. We would go down to the corner drugstore and buy a 5-cent cherry Coke. It was about, a 5-ounce cup. It wasn't a big cup at all. But I tell you what, those are the best cherry Cokes anybody ever made in the little drugstore in Post, Texas there at Bob Collier Drugs. And I will remember them forever. I hope that the Lord has let Bob Collier set that drugstore back up in heaven so that we can go in and get cherry Cokes again when I get to heaven and get to be with my papa and my grandmama. My mother's story. My mother had an older brother, Uncle Lewis. He was 7 years old, and Mother was adopted. And they adopted her, I believe, at 6 months old. And they were thrilled to have their little girl now. They had a boy and a girl. And with the 7 years between them, my mother just worshiped the steps that Lewis took, and she thought she had to run after him and everything. And Grandmama did not think she had to run after him and everything because he was ornery. I have a piano that was my grandmother's. My uncle thought a funny thing to do would be to light a firecracker, throw it in the piano, and run out the front door and get in his car and be half a block away when it went off. This is a little true. And that piano literally rang for hours. He was ornery, he was. But my mother adored him, just absolutely adored her brother. My mother was a tomboy, which didn't go down as well with my grandmother as I think a girly girl would have. But my mother was always something of a tomboy. But all she had was a big brother. She didn't have any big sisters to teach her anything. So she grew up there on the plains, on the Staked Plains. She lived in Post. She lived in Lubbock. But they really were part and parcel of the landscape in Post, Texas. We grew up in the Nazarene church there. My great-grandmother was a charter member to that church. There's a beautiful, beautiful stained glass window in the First Nazarene Church in Post. I think it's on 10th Street. If you ever get a chance to be in that area, drive by and look at that window. My great-grandmother and several other ladies in the church collected their egg money to save up for that stained glass window, and it is just beautiful. It's Jesus with his arms wide open, which is just exactly what his arms do. They're wide open, saying, "Come to me, come to me." So Uncle Lewis grew up and got married, and he had 2 children, a daughter, Carolyn, and a son, David, and they were our oldest cousins, and of course, we worshiped everything they did. Carolyn is 9 years older than I am, and David is 6 years older than I am. And then came my family. My sister is 3 years older than I am, so all of us cousins were born 3 years apart. And here I was, the straggler, and Mother told Aunt Rachel it was her turn, and nobody ever got around to another one, so I'm the tail end of that family. So, but my cousins have several children. My sister and I both have singles, girls that were our only children because of health problems. But I married into a family. My husband had 2 sisters and a brother, so he had a fairly large family. And his sisters had many children. So we used to tell my daughter that she had dozens of cousins. That's literally true. My father-in-law has more great-grandchildren than I can even count anymore. I think it's in the 50s or something now. So that's just amazing. I met my husband when I went to what they call high school days at a small Nazarene college in Bethany, Oklahoma, called Bethany Nazarene College. It is now called Southern Nazarene University. But I came for college days. I walked in the door. It was a crisp November day. My hands were cold. And this really good-looking guy walked up to me and said, "I'll warm your hands up." I didn't find out till later that he's really shy usually, and he has no idea what made him say that, except maybe God did. And that's how we met in November of 1977. We got married in January of 1980. We had our daughter in June of 1981. And we have been married now over 37 and a half years, and we're very happy. And if I think of any more family stories to tell, I'll be glad to put them on here. If y'all are interested, just let me know. Thank you. Love you guys. Bye-bye.